Well, hello and welcome to the State of Education, Indiana, at the 5th Annual Reagan Institute Summit on Education. My name is Brian Payne, and I serve as the President and CEO of the Central Indiana Community Foundation, one of 95 community foundations in Indiana, which is by far the most of any state in the Union. Today, I have the great privilege to host a fireside chat with Governor Eric Holcomb. The theme of RISE this year is Networked, the quest for connectivity. And Governor Holcomb, I'm proud to say that you are leading the way, ensuring that learners of all ages are being connected to meaningful opportunities. Governor, welcome, and thank you for your time and your leadership of our state and your leadership nationally. It's really great to be with you.
Great to be with you as well, and to everyone that's engaged on this all-important topic. Looking forward to having a conversation.
Thanks. So, Governor, you have this wonderful next level agenda for our state. But first, let's talk about next level jobs. What are the key tenets of the next level jobs and the rationale behind the free or reimbursed workforce training for Indiana residents?
Yeah, it started shortly after I was sworn into office, and like my predecessors, I think we're hearing the number 1, 2, and 3 priorities for businesses and their concerns were workforce, and the need for more of it, and the need for it to be skilled according to their business model. And so, and we also were hearing from people maybe on the sidelines, potential employees that were saying that they wanted more opportunities and more access to the training that would put them in those very positions. And so this wasn't rocket science or brain surgery. This was, how do we connect the ers and the es, the employers and the employees, and connect the two and have providers in the middle, regardless of where along the spectrum those providers could be found at. So it could be K through 12. It could be adult learners outside the traditional education system or academia. And so our goal was to try to convene that. So it prompted us to construct a governor's workforce cabinet that was almost like an umbrella over everyone that was concerned about this very same topic and had a stake in its future and was willing to put skin in the game. And so you think about the usual suspects. You think about K through 12. You think about the Department of Workforce Development that has a number of programs, and you think about the Commissioner for Higher Education. How do we corral all those and make sure they're aligned in one mission instead of, going in 17 good directions maybe for the clients that they were serving at the time? But how do we tap in and harness that synergy that's there more efficiently? And what we found is, like so many other governors around the country, is you have to establish pathways, and that word gets used a lot, and rightly so, because you have to have pathways, plural, and those pathways each have a different width or different lanes for each. And so what we were trying to do is say, what are the high wage, high demand jobs that the governor's workforce cabinet can identify that we need to fill now? And then how do we construct the curriculum and the credentials and their certificates, everything that goes along with that, to meet the needs of the real economy that's out there right now. And by the way, will change in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. So you have to be nimble enough and willing enough, courageous enough maybe, to adjust not just your goals, whether you, and not that you might fall short of your goals, but your goals may change too, as the world does. When you think about a state like Indiana, that's we pride ourselves on being number 1 per capita in terms of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. If we're not in the space of battery and semiconductors and chips, microelectronics, hypersonics, then a lot of what we're manufacturing today may not be there tomorrow as we go through some of these transitions. And so that was the whole idea of Next Level Jobs, was to create this one-stop shop and have everything else align around it and through it.
Yeah, Governor, I think a lot of leaders identify that we got to get out of our silos within our organizations, our state government, but actually accomplishing it is really hard. I mean, everyone can identify that we need to do it. In my
Yep.
shop with 60 employees, I want to get out. I want our departments out of our silos. How did you? A couple insights about it. You had this idea; it was clear, but how did you actually get people to work across departments and really accomplish all that you've accomplished? A couple key insights.
Yeah, the first thing you got to do is be inclusive and not just encourage, but almost require people to speak up and to reflect what they are hearing, maybe in front of others. And so, we have a large cabinet table in my office, and it's got enough seats for everyone that's a stakeholder to be around that table. And then, of course, from the top, you got to kind of set the stage or describe the culture as it is and where you want it to be. So cast that vision, as President Reagan, few others have ever equaled his ability to cast a vision and then realize it. But you have to, once you cast that vision, then you've got to have the blueprint or the game plan. We're big sports nuts around here, so I always think about the game plan and going out onto the court of the field and saying, now we got to execute, and then we got to hold ourselves accountable. And so we have a more than monthly reporting, but that would be the longest we would go. But we are constantly reporting on where we are in the process to hit those goals. If we're short or not, if it's got to do with bringing down recidivism, the recidivism rate, or infant mortality, or educational standards, or you name it, we're constantly reporting on where are we. And what we've found is the more that we have those leaders around the table, be it business, be it academia, be it state government, local government, chambers of commerce, the folks that are very, the ones that are the very ones that are affected most by whether we succeed or fail, we're hearing from them on the ground. And so that, in addition to having a lot of meetings that aren't as formal as that, and we're not just having meetings for meeting's sake, but I'm constantly trying to learn. This morning, as an example, I had the carpenters and the millwrights in my office talking about their workforce development programs. A couple nights ago, a dinner with business CEOs, asking them, and I literally got to one. I called someone out because we had gone around the table, and everyone had said it's workforce, workforce, workforce. It's workforce, 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 and they were not shy about some of the complaints. And I said, okay. And I named one individual, said, you're the only one at the table that hasn't lodged a complaint or filed a complaint. And I'm right here. What's the deal? And he said, no, years ago, I decided I was going to create my own pathways and pipelines, and I'm recruiting right out of, and he just went through the list, Purdue, Ball State, Grace, and a number of colleges and universities and other providers. And he said, by the time they've matriculated, they've gone through the process or graduated or got that degree or certificate, they already are coming to work for me. And so he had kind of solved the problem. And then you've got to back up and say, when you're looking like a state like Indiana that has 5 auto OEMs, just to use it as an example, as we make this transition, we've also got people retiring. So it's not just going into K through 12, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's how many people do we have retiring over the next 15 years, and how are we going to replace those? And so you're really getting almost into the third grade when you start to think about how do we start to get people engaged in exploring what's close to them. And that means you've got to have again, not just, this isn't just theoretical or rhetorical for that matter. You've got to have people at the table, and you've got to have honest discussion and debate about where we are and where we want to be.
Thank you for that, Governor. Through your leadership and your team's leadership, 31,000 Indiana residents have completed a grant eligible certificate, and a grant recipient recipient typically earns $7,000 more than those without that certificate. How can this initiative combat the notion that, it's always about traditional four-year baccalaureate degrees, that is the American dream, the pathway to the American dream? You're creating other pathways. How can we make those other pathways have the same kind of prestige or priority among families and among, both high school students and adults in their 20s and 30s? How do you raise the level of kind of like, this is a legitimate pathway that will have great outcomes? How do we create that narrative?
Yeah, and it will never do enough in my in my estimation. We have a lot of ground to make up, um, but we have to get to where it's part of our culture or second nature to accept the reality that you just described, and that to me means folks going through K through 12 um, have to understand that there are multiple options. We live in a world that demands options and speed, almost instant gratification sometimes, but options and speed, and education and training, the programs and the process needs to reflect that as well, because that's the time that we are living in. And we have the technology to help us do that. We have to make awareness a priority, because maybe it'll always be true to some extent, but now more than ever, it's not who you know, it's what you know. And then if we can get you plugged into, here's what you know, here's what you are capable of. If you have the aptitude and the attitude, then you can go about as far as you want in any field, whether it be a carpenter or a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist, as I described earlier. And so to do that, we have to expose our students to all that is out there. And what we've sought to do is create a system at school and be very transparent about what is close to them in their zip code, within a 12-mile radius, for not just the students, but the parents as well. And then expose them to all the options that are out there. That requires those partnerships to be put in place and to have direct pipelines from a school to a business. And then also, to go right alongside that, what we're finding out is, once students know, and a lot of them are, well, how much am I going to make? What's my salary? What in this example or this example? And if you're giving them choice, if you're giving them options on a menu, and then as they explore, as they engage, then they start to lock in on, and where you really see people bloom or grow is when they're locking in on something that's consistent also with their personality and their ambition, and expectations start to rise up as well. But we've got to answer your question directly, is we have to expose them to all the options that are there, and that awareness has to increase, and it has to increase for everyone that can consume that data, meaning the parent, the student, the business, and the school as well, to know what we've got and what we're producing in terms of talent that's ready and close.
Thank you, Governor. I want to shift the conversation a little bit to early learning. So the pandemic showed that early learning opportunities are intrinsically tied to the economic well-being of a state. Why did you decide on My Way pre-K program, which for being the route in which you wanted to invest in early childhood? And what are your goals for early childhood education in the state of Indiana?
Yeah, this might run deep in my family. I actually had my mother as not a preschool teacher, but as a elementary school teacher, and that's kind of when I learned life wasn't always going to be fair when you have your mom in school. But I was in preschool and kindergarten, and so not just a personal experience, but knowing the foundation that was laid, not just for me, but for my friends, and then seeing it around the state of Indiana. Also knowing now, fast forward in this current position, knowing the need to create more of a foundation very early on. If we wait until third grade, it's over. Like if you're skipping steps and building that foundation, it's over. And so many families aren't providing, unfortunately, sadly, not every family is given the same gifts that maybe I had or you had. And so what's the alternative? And for many. And so that's where it became, regardless of socioeconomic background, that's where it became something of, this is the great equalizer. If we can provide those first steps in a student's learning and preparation, then I don't know of anything that's has a better ROI, short term or long term. And then along the way, I read a stat recently that said that 13% of a child's waking hours from birth to age 18 are spent at school. 13% of their waking hours. And so that says 87% are spent not in school, birth to 18. And it could be at FFA, it could be at the YMCA, it could be at church, it could be at 4-H, it could be at Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, all kinds of productive uses of time. But for many, they're not. And if you shave off 1 or 2 years at the beginning going into elementary school, the stats speak for themselves. And so I couldn't think of a better alternative to not just equip the student, but also in today's time, empower a parent who might not be able to work to stay home with their child and prefer to work as well, and the adverse ripple effect that would have. And so this was really how can we invest early on so the problem doesn't get away from us and then compound itself for them and then at large society.
Are there specific goals that you guys are trying to reach? I mean, do you have specific metrics of how many kids you're trying to engage with pre-K programs that would not have the economic opportunity if it wasn't for the state of Indiana?
I want to go as far as the need is there. And just to put it in perspective, I mean, we've made up a lot of ground recently. And to be fair, this started in a 5-county area, this kind of awareness and reaction in 2015. And then we went to, we expanded it in 2017 in my first year to 20 counties, kind of proved that it was working. And then we expanded in 2019 to all 92 counties. And we're devoting hundreds of millions of dollars toward this end. And I think the proof is in the pudding, meaning that folks in the legislature are seeing in their respective districts statewide, this works. And by the way, this, it used to be the critique was, oh, that's just childcare. Well, I can think of worse things, but that might be good. And they're going to be learning as well, because there are still, not just in Indiana, but around the country, a lot of childcare deserts. And so that's another pressure point that this gets at. And so I will continue to press for more, making sure that we have the capacity, that quality capacity to roll out and really positively affect a child's trajectory early on.
Great. Hey, Governor, let's move to recovery, economic recovery, full pandemic recovery when we can get there. How has Indiana promoted economic recovery following the pandemic?
Well, that's kind of the reason why not just we created the governor's workforce cabinet, but to align and make sure that we were, again, nimble enough to adjust on the fly. And who would have thought at the time that this was going to, have to factor in a global pandemic that's still with us. It's an endemic now, but it's still affecting different parts of the world. And so making sure, again, that those kind of usual suspects, DOE, CHE, Commission of Higher Education, Department of Education, Department of Workforce Development, but it goes way beyond that. And to your point, we then started to pull in our Indiana Economic Development Corporation and made sure that they had a hand in, not just an eye on, but a hand in different programs that we were deploying that would not just get people back to work or accelerate that recovery. And that's made a huge difference in making sure that we were chasing the jobs that we wanted, and then that we could affect the curriculum and the training programs that the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. To put this in perspective, and I can give you a couple examples real quick. We didn't just look at this through the lens of education and training. Again, we said, what about economic development that's going to give them the opportunity for meaningful work? And so we rolled out a number of different programs. So we rolled out programs that said, we're going to help businesses modernize their shops and their businesses, and gave out grants all over the state. And we'll continue to do that to make sure that during these transitions, I mentioned battery and chips, semiconductors, during those type of transitions, businesses that are part of that ecosystem that have to rely on talent and employees to grow have the latest and greatest machinery, technology, et cetera, in place. The state's investing in that. We also have a program that I'm not familiar with any other in the country, probably are, but ours is wildly successful, and it's called the READI program, READI, and it's Regional Economic Acceleration and Development Initiative. And what it does is it puts 500 million state dollars out in the market. It says to the state of Indiana, 92 counties, self-select, regionalize, figure out what your migratory patterns are, population shifts, et cetera, your workforce shed, and what your needs are. Could be housing, childcare, workforce training programs, et cetera. And we'll put $1 in, and you got to match it with at least 4. We put that program out there at 500 million. It attracted 10 billion from the sidelines, 4 billion in housing. And so it's very responsive to building up communities and addressing what the issues are from the ground up. It wasn't the state saying, you need 3,000 more housing units. It was the local community saying, this is what we need to fill the housing gap or childcare. And then the state put in $1 good, and it's amazing what that will attract. We were, quite frankly, blown away, and so much so that I want to go back for a READI repeat or a READI round 2, because I think there's another 10 billion out there. So all that to say that you've got to, in the recovery, you've got to pull in folks who wouldn't normally see themselves at that table sitting next to one another to try to build the economy that provides that opportunity, that then the education and training apparatus is all geared toward making sure it grows as fast as it can.
Governor, I want to follow up on that, but I want to acknowledge the READI program. I feel like, in Indiana, there's been times where we've been criticized as a state for not really thinking regionally enough. And I feel like the work that you've done with the READI program has really put a lot of that criticism to bed, and rightly so. Also in philanthropy, we use these catalytic grants and matching grants all the time that so many of our grants are, we'll put up, if you raise 1 million, we'll give you 250,000, the same idea. And those are always remarkably successful. So I just want to acknowledge that, excuse me, the READI program, I think, has accomplished a tremendous lot, building community, building regionalism, building authentic relationships in different counties, and really a lot of innovation. And then it's attracted a lot of private capital, public capital. So it's really stacking capital in a very powerful way.
Yeah, you were way down this trail before we were, but we finally caught on, and you were right. And we're trying to maybe copy some of your best practices, and you're right. And the other thing that's done is it is put in place all over the state of Indiana, all in 17 different regions. Every single county just found something beyond their traditional lines to join. But it also put into place kind of a leadership committee schools, businesses, hospital administrators, everyone in that region that came together to promote what the priorities were and projects is still there. And now it wasn't just to submit a proposal, but it's still there. And now what we're hearing from, this is something I didn't anticipate, but now we're hearing from other potential businesses that will come our way that say, how do I get plugged into that region? Because there's already a leadership committee that can address the schools that my employees would go to, or the hospital, the healthcare system that they'd have access to, or you just kind of fill in the blank. And that's a kind of byproduct of this whole investment that I don't think, at least I didn't anticipate at the very outset.
That's a great point, Governor. Hey, I'm going to get to a final question here in a second, but you mentioned a lot of key stakeholders that were part of the economic recovery. Was there any stakeholder that you didn't kind of identify at the beginning that kind of became one along the way that said, that was not one that we thought was going to be key, but as we went through this journey of recovery, this was a key stakeholder? Just any surprises?
Yes. The industry that represents outdoor amenities. A lot of people choose where to live before they choose where to work these days. Maybe like this ain't your grandpa's Indiana, anymore. And so whereas my father or my grandfather would have gone where the work was, just common sense, today people go where they want to live and then they figure it out. And they might do that 4 or 5 times in 4 or 5 years. And so that churn, you have to accept reality. And for a state like Indiana, who competes, really punches above its weight class, but competes against some much bigger states with coast and mountains and a lot of amenities that maybe we don't have. We still have a lot, but we have to sell it and we have to organize it to be able to continue to compete. And the outdoor industry in the state of Indiana, kayaking, hiking, biking, trails, like who would have thought 20 years ago, trails, and you look at the cities that are really vibrant and growing, they have outdoor activity options galore. And so those folks really stepped up and said, I had this lofty goal of saying every Hoosier, 6.8 million Hoosiers ought to live within 5-mile access to a trail. And I kind of thought like people were going to ridicule and mock and throw things that like, that's outlandish. It turns out to be the opposite. It turns out once these trails started connecting dots all over the state of Indiana, it was infectious and people wanted more. And so now I think that's freight train is moving down the tracks, and we're going to continue to do more because again, that need's there, but that doesn't happen or buying more public land, planting more trees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That industry really, or sector really stepped forward. And I wasn't, again, they looked at this like, you want economic development? You want to be a vibrant community, whether it's Valpo or Indianapolis or Evansville or Jeffersonville or North Vernon, you name it. We've got beautiful terrain all over and landmarks, man-made and Mother Nature. And we need to be able to take advantage of all that. And that sector did. And it's going to really continue to attract people, visitors and residents to our state.
Thank you, Governor. I'm behind me is a painting of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, looking from Town Square south to the Salesforce Tower downtown. So I share your passion on that.
I love it.
Hey, we've got about 30 seconds, but this is the last quick question. What is one lever of change that every aspiring education governor should work towards to better connect their education system to employability? You've got about 25 seconds now to answer that question.
I would say engagement. It's not just a word. You've got to get the business community to lock in on not just the problem and to not think about the old ways of doing things. You don't say, put up a sign that says now hiring and expect people to just come. You've got to have them engaged from early on at K through 12, the whole pathway, so that folks are almost wearing a jersey, their jersey, when they graduate and continue on this lifelong learning pathway.
Thank you, Governor. It's been a real pleasure for me, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your innovation. Indiana is an innovation state. We don't get enough credit, and you've really escalated that innovation that's been happening. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.